We'll see what kind of energy I've got. Everyone's so excited for spring. I just find I'm tired all the time because it's getting up at 3 a.m. to go steelhead
Yeah,
fishing or turkey hunting's coming soon. I
right.
just went and got the turkey tag sale started this week. So
That's right.
it's been a conga line of
Yeah,
people, and
yeah.
I'm excited. I'm pretty stinking lucky. And I wake up in the morning, I can lift my head off my pillow and see about 30 of them roosted.
But you
So
can.
yeah, they're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Chase is 11 this year, and he wants to shoot one with a bow really
Oh,
bad.
really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's been awesome. Last night was the last night of league for Mountain Bowmen,
Yeah,
and it's all guys. But
yeah.
my wife, she'll probably punch me for saying this, but she has been participating in a NCAA type bracket, but for the Bachelorette with her friends. That's been on Monday nights, and I wanted to shoot bow league on
Yeah,
Monday nights.
yeah,
So I'm like, it's gonna be cool. I'll just bring Chase along,
yeah.
and he hasn't shot any 3D archery at all,
Uh-huh.
and he just took to it like a fish,
Very good.
cutter and
Yeah.
a club. And we had our party last night, and there's a Crockett score. They'll
Uh,
bring a rack in every week, and they all throw $1 in, and everyone guesses what it'll score.
yeah.
That little shaver won last night. Yeah, he did. It was 115 inches, and he guessed 115
And
inches.
is he usually pretty good?
No,
Yeah.
so he's learned.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so he's learned essentially how to gamble.
Huh.
But yeah, he was pretty excited.
Yeah.
He was flashing his dollar bills
Yeah,
last night.
I
All,
bet.
all about 17 of them. He
Yeah.
was pretty
Do you think it's just
excited
a straight guess?
for sure.
Yeah, okay.
For sure. The
Okay.
scientific method for him, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
he was, he had that look on his face like I knew. It's pretty stinking
Yeah.
funny, but
Yeah.
it's a great time to
Yeah.
be a sportsman.
Yeah.
I got up at 3 this morning and steelhead fished and got back, and I did not have any clothes with me. I was wearing sweatpants and something that resembled leggings, and I smelled like steelhead. So I'm very grateful that we carry these awesome Sitka pants at Chase Outdoors because I
Cool.
pulled them
Yeah.
off of the rack, so it's presentable to do this podcast with you. So welcome everybody to the Chase Outdoors, the podcast. As always, I'm your host Justin Geike, and I've got a great guest with me. I've been really looking forward to this for about the last month, 6 weeks or so.
Yeah.
That we had a conversation about doing that. Our guest today is an award-winning author. He's a freelance newspaper columnist, an outdoor reporter in the state of Wisconsin for a long time. And for those of us who hunt and fish, we know this individual probably most notably from the Wisconsin Outdoor News. Some history with Deer and Deer Hunter as well. Our guest is the wildlife research contributing writer for MeatEater, the monster in our industry that it is. A piece of my own heart, a road trolling enthusiast, Jason Sloan. If you're listening, I'm sure you're raising the glass to that. And also incredibly, I guess the word I'm looking for is unbeknownst to me. I didn't know, but I'm super impressed. Marathon runner. Pretty exciting. And that guest is Patrick Durkin from Eau Claire. Patrick, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Uh, Lot to get into
Okay.
today. I want to be respectful of your time, but marathon running. Yeah, we just got done with dinner, and you told me that you didn't start running marathons until what age was it?
55 was my first marathon.
55 was your
Yeah.
first marathon.
Yeah.
And when did you get started in running and
Yeah.
all that fitness stuff?
To go back a little bit, I never liked running as a kid or as a young adult. I ran a little bit during my Navy years, but not seriously. I mean, I ran a little for fitness. I probably never ran more than 2 or 3 miles at a time. And then I pretty much got out of any kind of conditioning, any kind of real taking care of yourself for many years. It wasn't until I was in my mid 40s where I found what was happening, Justin, was I just wasn't enjoying hunting as much as I used to because I'd get out hunting and I'd see a hill and think, do I really want to go up that hill to chase that turkey or check that next, area out for whitetails when I was
Yeah,
hunting up in Ontario and northeastern Minnesota, those kind of areas.
yeah,
And I started to realize, well, either you're gonna have to change the way you're living, or else you're gonna start losing all those opportunities. And so, starting in my late 40s, I changed my diet and just for eating as much. No, I have like you and I had a dinner tonight that for me is kind of the exception.
Mhm.
I seldom eat like that
Yeah.
because I just realized I couldn't keep eating the way I was,
Mhm.
and so I'm only 5'8", and I was up around 200 pounds back in my mid 40s, and then by the time I think it was around 49, 48, someplace in there, I changed my diet and started working out, started going to the gym, and I think by this is like 2000, the year 2000, so that was about 23 years ago.
Mhm.
I started changing things. Then by 2004, I started going to the gym. I started losing weight that year. I went from 200 pounds down to 150, and I pretty much stayed in that 150 to 160 range ever since.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's then I I did all the I basically did muscle work,
Hmm.
weights and stuff for a few years. Then realized I wasn't doing anything cardio. I needed to get things going for the cardiovascular system. So I started doing things like the elliptical machines at the gym and stationary bike, those kind of things, and that started to kind of bore me. Then in 2007, I started to run. I ran my first 5K at a turkey trot over in Minnesota, where my
Hmm.
family gathers for Thanksgiving. And the thing I'll never forget was when that thing was over, it was just kind of fun hanging around with all the other runners, people who had done this. And there's a certain vibe there I liked.
Hmm.
You could tell they accomplished something.
Yeah.
And so, like, for a couple of years, I ran 5Ks every now and then. Then by the time 3 years later, I ran my first half marathon. And I thought, boy, if I thought I was getting a nice vibe from the 5K and the 10Ks and the 5 mile runs, that was a real interesting phenomenon for me to finish a half marathon, 13.1 miles. Then you really felt like you did something.
Yeah.
So then I thought, well, what am I going to do next year? So I thought, yeah, I'll try for a marathon. So I went up to Eagle River in 2011 when I was 55 and ran the Journeys Marathon, my first marathon. I couldn't have chosen probably a tougher course in this state to run because there's a lot of hills. But it's kind of fun, they put you on a bus, truck you almost all the way to Boulder Junction from Eagle
Hmm.
River, then you run back to Eagle River.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a neat thing. I enjoyed the experience. And so now I've been doing that running marathons since it was 2011. So this will be my 13th year now running marathons. And I just find that if I stay in good enough shape to run marathons pretty much whenever I want to, I'm in pretty good shape then.
Yeah.
I can hunt out west now. I've been hunting out west for elk since 2005,
Yeah.
and I wish I'd done that earlier in life. But earlier in life I had other goals. So I was a magazine editor and pretty much focused on whitetails, and then as I got older and I started freelancing back in 2001, and I've been freelancing ever since. And so I never really had a chance to do Western hunts until I was freelancing. So that kind of all meshed together too. But I just I really believe in the idea of staying fit and fighting. You can't, as I'll often tell people, you won't win. Eventually old age will catch up with you. It will take you down. We're all mortal,
Yeah.
but you can fight it and you can do something about it and keep yourself in the game much longer than most people can. And that's where I feel right now is I don't I hang around enough young fit guys who are strong as hell where I realize I'll never be strong as hell, but at least I can keep up with them and at least not be where they leave me behind.
Yeah.
And I think, well, someday they'll leave me behind, but not today. So
I do, and I think it's awesome. I haven't run marathons. I'm still at that phase where I'm at 200 pounds, but
uh,
I do. I'm attracted to the idea of
oh, you're
of
bigger
weighing
than I am though.
less. I do, I do admire that. But there's one thing you'd mentioned you like the vibe of the race, and
Hmm.
I do 5Ks and adventure races, and I am working on the idea of a half marathon right now.
Hmm.
I'm running 7 at a pretty regular basis because it's the smallest loop from my house. I can't run less if I'm going to go in a circle from my house than 7 miles on the head. But you're right about that vibe. As you're talking to me, it just kind of caught me. It's like every time I'm at a fishing tournament, the fishing tournament's over. there's not that vibe of everybody's cool with each
Oh
other.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
you cut me off, or I lost this fish, or I can't believe I let this guy beat me. It's
yeah.
not kumbaya.
No,
You know, the
no.
same can be said too around hunting cat. There's always that one guy who's sour that the other guy got the big buck. That does happen sometimes, but you're absolutely right. Like that adventure race or running community, it doesn't seem like anyone really cares if they win.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, I think everyone always has this expression about you run your own race,
Yeah.
and you do keep track of what other people in your. I do. I keep track of other people in my age group. And you show up, if you show up in enough local races, you kind of get an idea who's out there in your age group. And I typically don't know them, but I know of them
Yeah.
if I run that area enough. I used to know the guys in the Appleton and Green Bay area a lot better. Again, I didn't know them like you and I are talking, but I recognize their names because I'd see them finishing ahead of me all the time at the end of the race. You see where you're ranked, you see people's names above you. I thought, I wonder who that guy is, and then you finally meet him, and typically you're busy and you move on and you gotta get back home or whatever, but you pay attention to who these folks are, and you realize, yeah, everyone kind of runs their own race and they aren't really too worried. I think they still want to win and
Sure.
they want to finish their best personal best, whatever it might be, but they also respect the fact that you're out there giving it. You might not be as fast as they are, but they respect the fact that you are out there race after race and trying to stay in the game. And I think everyone kind of respects that.
The other group that's like that is the rugby crowd.
I bet.
When I played rugby, it was the most violent, evil, cutthroat, horrible sport that I've ever
Yeah.
participated. And when that game was done, the home team always treated the other team like family. You
Hmm.
know, there was parties and meals and gatherings and stuff like that, and singing songs together.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was one of the coolest things. Of at the time we're out there, we're trying to murder each other, but it's only for the love of the sport.
Hmm.
And when it was done, it was almost like brothers in arms
Yeah.
type of,
Yeah.
of a behavior. It
Yeah.
was it was pretty cool, and I think we could probably, as hunters and fishermen, probably take a little piece of
Oh,
that sometimes.
you, you've you know you know you bring something up to that really is interesting, and um, I used to cover a lot of fishing tournaments, and I'd see all the petty jealousies behind the scenes, and I always thought, is this how you want to treat fishing? And but some guys they do, and it's just respecting that guy's skills. They're jealous of that guy's skills,
Yeah,
and that was just I used to not enjoy covering fishing tournaments for that reason because there was just so much of that angst and the petty jealousies
yeah,
and pecker checking and all that kind of stuff that goes
yeah.
on. And you think, it doesn't have to be that way, you guys, but it still is.
I think a prime example of it not being that way was the Bassmaster Classic that finished
Ah,
up
very
this
good.
weekend.
Good to hear that.
Jeff Gustafson out of Canada
Yeah.
won. In everybody that was competing against him was making comments of like, my whole life I've said nice guys finish last. It might not happen this time because
Ah,
Jeff is the nicest
that's good
guy,
to
and
hear.
there's people up there that were in, sixth and 10th place, just say, "Man, I
Yeah.
sure hope Gussie wins. I sure hope
Yeah.
Gussie wins."
Yeah.
It was a really cool thing to
Yeah.
see. One of the nicest guys on the
Yeah.
Elite Series,
Yeah.
take it home, and he was happy and he was
Yeah.
excited, but it wasn't so much. It was a, yes, we did it, but it wasn't so much a, look what I did. It was a really, and I don't know what it is about the Bassmaster Classic, but it just gets me right in my heart chords every time
Yeah.
I watch it, because
Yeah.
I just admire people that go through what it takes to be at that level, and it was really cool. And shout out to Jay Shakura to Stevens Point. Made the top 10,
Yeah.
after a rookie year on the Elite Series, and taking Rookie of the Year and winning an elite event, to see a local guy out there competing on the last day of the
Yeah.
Classic for a place that has open water 5 months a year
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
pretty stinking
Yeah.
impressive. Same
Definitely.
thing too with the number of Canadians. That was the first
Huh.
Canadian that won and only the second international winner. So
Oh,
it's just that competition
yeah.
part, whether it's
It's
your marathons
it's
there,
cool. It's
that
cool to
it
hear that
is.
because
It
like I say,
is.
my experience was always different from that. So I
Yeah.
like to hear that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And speaking of competing, you just got done competing
Yeah.
in something, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I ran the LA Los Angeles Marathon, and this one of those I've now run I think I've run all the major U.S. marathons. I've run Boston. In fact, I qualified for Boston the second time here in Wausau at the Wausau
You
Marathon.
did.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah. So I ran Boston twice, qualified both times, and then New York Marathon I ran a year and a half ago, and I was trying to get into that one, but I could never run a fast enough qualifying time New York has a very high standard for qualification time.
Hmm.
So I thought, what's another way I can run that? So I looked up a fundraiser for a cancer research group
Hmm.
out of New York, and I raised money for them to qualify to get into that race. And then I ran Chicago 4 years ago, and then I ran LA now. So in LA too, I did the where you go on. I think I raised like $4,500 for ALS and
Yeah.
MS and Alzheimer's research,
Yeah.
and that was kind of running that New York marathon and the Los Angeles marathon to raise money for these terrible diseases
Yeah.
for the research into it. It added a new element to my running.
Like a purpose outside of
Yeah, it
yourself.
gave a purpose outside
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
and it was really interesting. I never really thought it'd be something that would affect me that way. But when you see people, in some cases, people you really don't know that well,
Hmm.
donating to your effort,
Yeah.
you realize, chances are there's a lot of people out there that were donating money. That when I got to know some of those folks, so many of them had personal stories, personal loss,
Yeah.
and then you keep that in mind when you're out running and because marathons are not easy. I mean, every marathon I run, you get in that mile 20 range and your body starts feeling it and you're struggling. And sometimes you got to stop and take a walk up a hill. And then you just remind yourself how lucky you are that you still have the health to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, you're younger than I am, but I'm sure too, it's not hard for you to think of some friends and family you've lost already who went too soon.
Yep.
And I think I'm 67 and I can think of a lot of good people who are gone already. So I keep those kind of things in mind when I run that. It's hard work and I'm struggling, but it's a self-inflicted thing I'm doing. But it's also for my own long-term health. And you hope you're inspiring your kids and making them realize that just because you're old doesn't mean you're done yet.
Hmm.
And so yeah. So anyway, I could talk about running all day, but I try not to.
I love hearing it. For me, like I started my first Western hunt, I was 19 years old, but I never put a lot of emphasis into it because I was guiding fishing and my schedule was
Yeah,
so busy in the
yeah.
fall because I was predominantly a muskie fisherman. So between the work that I had and trying to hunt around here, I just didn't have a lot of time to develop that love for it. And it wasn't until I pretty much went extremely part-time or quit guiding that I could really develop my love for the West. And
Hmm.
with that comes, the understanding that you do have to be in good shape
Right.
because if you've ever seen a mule deer go full send off the side of a cliff that you shouldn't think they should be able to go down and then turn up and go up something
Yeah.
without skipping a step like that, you're like, your adversary
Yeah.
is eons more capable
Right.
than you are.
Yeah.
And it's not so much being better than them, but especially with hunting public land and how it's getting more difficult to find access, you're really hunting against other hunters now.
Hmm.
I've never seen like the places that we hunt in Wyoming on public. I've never seen more people than we
Hmm.
have the last couple of years. It's
Wow.
overrun and
Hmm.
it's crowded.
Yeah.
It's hard to actually escape. And that's the benefit and the negative of technology and
Right.
participation. It's
Yeah.
great that more people are doing it.
Yeah.
It's great that people are spending money on the product, but there's another side to it
Hmm.
too. And equipment like OnX and stuff, how it's helped people access difficult to access
Yeah.
properties that guys who can use a map and a compass have been accessing for years.
Right.
It takes some of that element, and you could go on about fishing too on the
Hmm.
electronic side. We were talking about that. Tom Keenan and I on the way back from fishing this morning, like what's going to happen to our fisheries in the future as things get easier and easier. But the one thing that's not going to get easier for us is our own bodies.
Hmm.
And I started hiking Rib Mountain more often. My wife is an extremely avid hiker. She's at about mile 450 to 500 of the 1,200 miles of the Ice Age Trail
Yeah.
right now. I ran into a guy who was about 60, 65, somewhere in there. and he was coming up from Stevens Point, and he would go up the ski face, hit the ski face, and go up and down it 6 times,
Hmm.
and he had a 100-pound pack,
Hmm.
which is a ton.
That's a lot of weight.
A ton of weight.
Yeah.
And he would pick those little white flowers, they daisies or whatever they are, and he would drop one at the top and he'd drop one at the bottom to count his up and down.
Huh.
And you could see the withering flower heads from his days of hiking, and you could see his dedication to it over time. But he had drawn a Wyoming moose tag. He was doing it DIY. It took him 25 years to get the tag. And he said, it's going to take me 6 trips to get that moose out by myself with a 100-pound package.
Yeah.
And that's what he was doing. And the guy, we ended up finding out that he got a moose on his second day of his hunt.
Wow.
And it just blew my mind. It's like, man, I'm huffing and I'm puffing, and I laugh. My brother was is extremely fit, and he was at the hospital, and his doctors, who was not from this country, had made the comment that he was a little big, but not bad for Wisconsin. So it just kind of we're on a different scale than most other people are.
Yeah.
But it really got me thinking of how important it is. I think that's where some of my love and inspiration for doing those activities, to make sure that I can continue to hunt and fish. And I suffer from degenerative disc disease. So like what I have to do to keep my body in check, just to be able to cast for muskies now, or to withstand 10 hours of fishing a bass tournament, and staying focused for that 10 hours, is like, you've got to take care of yourself. So I'm inspired by guys like you who are doing that. Obviously, there's a ton of other big, you get your Cam Haynes, your elk-shaped guys, and all that. It's something to not be jealous of, but to be inspired by, because what it really does is say, hey, when, like most people can afford to go on a Western hunt later in their life when they have more time, but if they don't have the health, then they can't do it. So, and as hard as it is to getting tags, I love to just advocate to every 18-year-old kid that'll come in the store to listen, like, dude, start applying right now and take care of yourself, because you can keep doing it. It's really cool. You had mentioned, your outdoor columnist work, and obviously health part, and how you love to do that, to get you back out in the woods and hunt. And I find, as we're going through your introduction, that you're doing both of those things for probably the biggest hunting media company in the country right now, with MeatEater. How did that all get started, and what is being involved with those guys like?
To go back, I met Steve Ranella, just a real lucky, fortuitous, or you want to describe it, thing, where our mutual friend is Doug Durin down in Cazenovia, Wisconsin, Richardson County. And Doug got to know Steve just by he read his book, American Buffalo, wrote to him, said he really loved the book, and he knew enough about Steve to know kind of where he grew up over in Michigan, and knew it kind of resembled how Doug grew up, and said, if you ever want to come hunting in southwestern Wisconsin for deer, let him know. And Steve said he never had ever taken anybody up in that kind of offer before, but there's some kind of connection there that those two guys must have sensed. And so Doug and I had gotten to know each other pretty much the same way, where Doug used to read my column, my newspaper column I'm still writing, was in the State Journal study, like in 1990, the Wisconsin State Journal in Madison. And Doug had been reading my column for years, and he knew I hunted my uncle's farm, not too far from his family farm in Richland Center. And so he had me down there, like me, a year before. We started hunting together a little bit, and had a good connection, good friendship started right away. And next year he emailed me and said, "Hey, I thought I'd get our writers hunt. This guy named Steve Ranella is coming over from Michigan, and you should read his book." And he sent me some information on Steve's books and stuff. And I started reading the guy's stuff, and I thought, this guy's he's a talent. He's excellent. I wrote to Steve one time. I said, "You're a hell of a reporter." And that for me was the ultimate compliment, because you could just tell he's so observant. He sees people and connects with them and takes really good notes, and then he's able to put that into his articles in a way, and his books in a way that it connects with people. And so that's how I met Steve, was through Doug, where he invited us down for a deer hunt in the late season, like late December. I think it was one of those years you could hunt into January for the late holiday hunt for deer
Mhm.
in that CWD area down there. And so that's how I met Steve. And then and then Steve started his podcast in I think January of 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And then he once in a while he'd be working on it. He was still doing some writing back then for other magazines, and once in a while he'd call me and just say, "Hey, who do you work with at this magazine? Who do you work with at that magazine?" And we'd trade information. And if he needed some information on whitetails, I always I've kept information on whitetails forever. So
Yeah.
it's just always been something in my background that I love all the minutia of whitetails in me. So he called me on something one time about deer, and I can't remember what it was. But anyway, so we always kind of stayed in touch that way. And then in 2018, um, I didn't know what was going on. I just knew he was starting something up where he had some investors, and they're going to be launching this big all these different media platforms. And I was over there, and I remember I was over in La Crosse. Steve was in town to give a talk at an Alda Leopold function,
Oh,
and he had me come over, and Giannis Patelis was his producer then for the
it's
podcast.
such a kick out of him.
Oh, he's a wonderful man,
Yeah,
wonderful guy.
I love watching
Yeah,
him. I really do.
he's another natural.
Yeah.
But they asked me if I could come over with Doug and do a couple of podcasts. So like I said, this is March of 2018, and I say it's a typical Steve Ranella. You're just starting to get ready to do a podcast. He just turns and he said, "Pat, I got a question for you." And he launches in this thing about he was going to be starting this media platform, and would I be interested in doing some writing for him? And I thought, I'm not stupid. I, I was I was already busy as hell. I
Yeah.
really was. I've had a good freelance career,
Yeah.
over 20 years now, 25 years, but I still thought I had enough survival instinct and intelligence to realize if Steve Ranella offers you something like that, you better take it and
Yeah.
make room for it somehow.
Right.
And I'm glad I did because it was really interesting. That was like 2018, middle of the year. And at that time, I had my newspaper column like in 17, 18 newspapers around Wisconsin. I was in Wausau. I'd been in Green Bay forever. I'd been in the State Journal in Madison forever. I had all these newspapers buying my column. Well, by the end of the year, as you know, as most people know, newspapers have just been in a fast dive to the bottom, unfortunately, which would really hurt me because I really like newspapers. I'm from that old school that grew up with two newspapers in the house, and the morning paper, the afternoon paper. We always read them all, and then all of a sudden, this major part of my work is gone by the end of the year. I still write the column, but it's no longer in all these big newspapers around the state like it used to be. And I thought, you know, that was pretty fortuitous that I didn't turn Steve Ranella down because
Right.
I would have been screwed. But
Yeah.
then again, by that time I was at an age where I thought, well, if you want to retire, that's within view now. But then again, I enjoy the thing I like about MeatEater though. And I could talk about this all day too. Is that they know what my strengths are. They know what
Yeah.
interests me, and a lot of my interests match up pretty well with their interests. Where it's not just how-to stories or
Right.
stories about hunting culture, hunting history, the way American history weaves in the hunting lifestyles and fishing lifestyles. This is all this kind of stuff that I enjoy writing about and covering. And then there's some of the articles I write about too. They're important issues that
Yeah.
hunters need to know about, and they might not want to read about it that day. But I always hope that if you put that down in the record, and these days, they build a long queue under my name at MeatEater. If you call it my name at MeatEater and go to my little site they have,
Mhm.
you can scroll a long ways now and see a lot of the articles I've written for
Yeah.
them. And I would like to think that some of these articles are kind of there for the record. Like I wrote one just recently about conservation funding and our long history of how we fund conservation in this country and how much the hunters have done for that. And yet, it's still not exactly a guaranteed thing that we can perpetuate forever.
Yeah.
And the more you know about this topic, the more you can then effectively talk to your elected representatives and try to get that kind of stuff protected for the long run so that when we're gone, there's other people that are filling behind us working for the same thing. So I like to think that all these kind of issues that I write
Yeah.
about, that there's some longevity to them, that they'll outlive me, and I'm now at an age where I understand very well that I'm not going to be here forever,
Yeah.
but I want to leave a few things behind. I was like this. There's an author back in the '70s who wrote the series Shogun. I don't know if you're probably too young for it, but
Yeah.
it's a historical novel. And he wrote another book. I can't remember the name of it now. I think it was King Rat or something. But one of his great lines in that book was, "The pen is a long hand from the grave." And I always like to think that I hope that I leave a few things behind that are worth reading after I'm gone.
Yeah.
You don't know what will be there, and much of what we write, and whether you're a musician or an artist, a lot of stuff you do is paper plate. It's here today and gone tomorrow. But you hope there's a few things you've written over time that are worth hanging on to, that people will call up in their computer and do a Google search 20 years from now and find one of those.
Yeah, it's sad as one of the things when you talked about print dying,
Hmm.
that's sucks is the fact that not just anybody could write in a newspaper.
Hmm.
You either had to be educated or reviewed, or you actually had, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm thinking of accountability.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
as a writer for
right.
accountability, and I've had dozens of stuff published, and I'll never forget the first article that I had published in Muskie Hunter magazine.
Mm, very good.
There was more red on that
Oh
than a
sure,
Rage Broadhead blood trail the first time
right.
I put that thing in because it was so bad. And it's funny that I've been fortunate enough to make a little bit of money writing in my life, and there's probably not a subject that I'm worse at.
Uh-huh.
My English is atrocious, and I don't know if it's dyslexia or just stupidity, but I'm not a good writer. But I wanted to do it, so I kept trying, and I enjoyed that. But now you look at the internet, and I had mentioned Jeff Kolzinski, the brand
Hmm.
manager from Hummingbird, when we were at dinner. He made a comment one time talking about just media in general now, and this was talking about the transition from when we saw kind of television also dying in a
Yeah.
way, or at least evolving into the digital platform there, that the pool has gotten very wide and very shallow.
Hmm.
And with all of that, anybody being able to put anything that they want and have it on the internet, it's really difficult to sift out the quality.
Hmm.
You're going through so much stuff. So I feel like having, the career that you've had and then being able to attach that to the MeatEater
Yeah.
platform has probably done a really good thing to
Oh,
help
definitely.
solidify that,
Yeah.
for the long term.
Yeah.
And that's got to feel just awesome to
Oh, it
know
does. Yeah.
that what you did matters and
Yeah.
will continue to matter. I think
Yeah.
that's really great. And and in talking about your writing, and then the MeatEater thing, like I've listened to their podcast forever. I think it's one of my
Oh,
favorites because
great podcast.
it is, because it's topics that teach you something, and it's not just a vacuum to eat up time.
Hmm.
And I especially like heading to I-90 West. That's a long ways across South Dakota. You can listen to a lot
Yeah.
of content, but you don't just want to fill it with nothingness.
Hmm.
There's a lot of podcasts I'll start listening to and shut off, and I mean, heck, I've listened to some of my old ones and shut them off right away because I couldn't stomach them. But with MeatEater, the thing is that you're constantly getting information,
Hmm.
data. There is a return in your investment for the time that you spent listening to it.
Definitely.
But one of the topics that you guys talk about all the time, the MeatEater talks about all the time, is the topic of CWD.
Hmm.
And to be completely transparent, I feel like we're geographically at a spot where we're kind of entering and heading to the north in a place that does not view CWD that perhaps the way most of the other country or the rest of the hunting geographic area thinks about CWD. And it was one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on, was to talk about that topic because of some of the feedback that I get. I remember the Drury brothers doing the first dream season, mentioning, CWD and dream season back in, gosh, that had to been 15 years ago,
Sure.
roughly,
Yeah.
when it kind of first became a big thing in Wisconsin, whatever that time, I think it was dream season 10, maybe earlier. But it was done in such a gloom and doom issue. And they
Sure.
did talk about the
Yeah.
chronological order. It was the 60s or whatever when it was first discovered.
66 thereabouts.
Yeah, I thought discovered in Wyoming. And I hear these things from feedback from people all the time. Well, it's been in Wyoming for 40 years and they're still running out of tags there, and I can't get a tag in Wyoming.
Mhm.
Or, are people in the Northwoods that already have this enormous generalization angst towards anything that comes out of the mouth of our Department of Natural Resources. I think there's a large part that just, if the DNR says something, they immediately say it's political, it's falsified. I don't want to, it will combat that in such a negative manner. We have very little direct conflict with CWD in the northern part of the state. We have an individual case here, an individual case there. A lot of times it is, penned animals, game farm deer seems to be where the majority is that. And a lot of our people here aren't traveling to Madison or La Crosse or the South and Southwest counties, McFarland and that stuff, to see the impact that it's having down there. But our guys in the Northwoods are saying we have no deer, and there's a whole bunch of deer in the South. When we're looking at deer per square mile, is it Iowa or Crawford County that's currently out? Is it 70 deer per square mile or something?
Iowa County's got some bad areas.
Western
County's got some bad areas.
Super high, and a lot of it's economics as far as we can't afford to hunt down there, or we don't own land or have access down there because so many people would love to. And I hear a lot of times, why is the places that I want to go to the most so horrible? What's going on? There's just I hear people that say they think it's a farce, and obviously it's not a farce. It's a real deal. And there's so much scientific information. There was that piece in, was it a year ago? I think Pennsylvania. I had put out some big scientific thing that they said it wasn't protein or it was a prion, and they believed that was at the state wildlife department, that they believed that they could find essentially a cure on an individual basis.
That wasn't the agency. It was a guy who a hunting group had brought in for advice and stuff, and he made this claim that within a year or so they'd have it solved. And well, anyone who knew anything about CWD knew that they weren't going to solve that in a year. This expert they had come in. I think he's a guy. I think he's a professor at I think down in Louisiana he was from or something.
Okay.
But yeah, he got a lot of attention.
Lots.
But then it just kind of fizzled away because there was nothing to it. But I don't know where to start here, because it is there's so many little things in what you said I could say, well, well this and well that. But the thing I'd keep in mind for everyone is that Iowa County, when they first found it down Dane County, Iowa County, right west of Madison, then they found like 3 cases initially. Then when they started stepping it up and really, when they found those 3 cases, they went up and really shot a lot of deer, did a lot of testing, and realized it was farther along than they realized. But where I hunt, for the most part, during deer season is Richland County. And Richland County in 2001, they did that big test in 2002, shot a lot of deer in 2002. They only found 1 deer in Richland County and a lot shooting that tested positive. Well, now Richland County is already passed Dane County for a number of CWD deer we found over the years down there. It's really boomed up in the last decade. And one thing it was a disease we didn't know a whole lot about coming in. So there's always a lot of discovery going on as, what do we know about it. And what we know now is that, unfortunately, CWD does move fastest. It's not real fast, but it moves fastest in probably some of our state's best deer habitat. You get down in that agricultural area of Richland County, Sauk County, Iowa County, and now it's been found in Buffalo County. And unfortunately, we aren't shooting and testing deer as much as we used to. So, I think Buffalo County has found 4 positives so far this year. And I think there's only out of 250 some tests, Now, if they're really serious about figuring out how bad the problem is in Buffalo County, we'd be shooting lot more, testing a lot more deer than 250 deer.
Right.
We'd be really going in there and shooting a lot of deer, try to figure out how bad is this now, should we best address it? But because of the public blowback and the politics involved, we aren't doing the kind of aggressive testing that we probably should be doing. And, and you get into northern Wisconsin and Marathon County, where we're sitting right now, they have, I think, only so far 4 deer have tested positive. But again, we have not done a real systematic check of this. This is a big county. Geographically, it's a huge county. It's got some diverse habitat in it. And you don't have the deer numbers here as you might have down in southern Wisconsin, but you still have a decent number of deer in this area. So
if we were Marathon, it's almost like its own state.
Yeah.
With the diversity of habitat that we have, you can go. It's almost amazing to the point where I can name roads and go good deer, bad deer.
Yep.
Get up into our northeastern portion up towards Anago. Yes, there's a healthy population of deer, but it's not infested with deer like it is in certain parts.
Sure.
There's a couple of pockets south down by Mosinee that are it's incredible, the quantities, and it's usually associated with habitat and the size of the private land and adjacent public harvest behaviors and stuff like that. I think the whole county is fully capable of having a huge population. That's probably a whole nother rabbit trail we can go down. But
well, it does tie to numbers though, and the more deer you have, and the better habitat you have, there's more deer in proximity to each other, and then disease spreads faster. You go up into northern Wisconsin where I hunt an area in Ashland County now for the last 20 years, where I look back in that deer camp's logbooks going back into the 60s, and as I say these days, the deer habitat in that little area where we hunt, it's so bad even the wolves don't hunt there. Because there's not many deer, and so when you have that few deer, chances of CWD ever spreading to the point it has in other parts of the state, no, it probably won't spread up in some of the northern counties the way it has elsewhere. Doesn't mean you should just blow it off.
Right.
But chances are between the low density of deer and the sparse habitat that we have for whitetails, there's a lot of, as there's a lot of becoming old and older trees now, forest types that just don't hold deer anyway. That many compared to down there. But what was interesting looking back on it now, I've now been covering this issue almost 25 years, and a lot of the science behind it, we didn't know the science, so it was kind of a educated guess. But we were hearing a lot, in the first 10 years that it's not really increasing that fast. So what's the big deal? Even had Jim Kroll, the deer czar guy, saying at one point, it'll probably get to about 2% of the population and then kind of cap itself right in that area. And other biologists, though, who are the real disease experts, said, no, there's really nothing here to suggest this disease will be a self-limiting disease of, rising to a certain point and then leveling off. It's probably to keep going up. And by 2012, you're seeing that in these counties down there now, that population's taken off. And it's too soon to say for certain, but I don't think there's anecdotal evidence that counties like Iowa County, just west of Madison, chances are that herd down there is starting to see the impact now of the disease itself, to limit the numbers. We'll know more in the years ahead, but it might not be happening as fast as some of the science first projected. But I'm pretty confident in saying now we're seeing areas where this disease has taken off, that the best days are behind us now for deer hunting. You're not going to see the number of big bucks anymore in some of these counties down there, because the bucks won't live that long. They'll be dead by the time they're 5.5 years old, 4.5 years old. So you won't see the Boone and Crockett bucks coming out there like we used to. And that's sad, because I think that was for my days at Deer and Deer Hunting magazine. We really didn't know at the time that we were living some of the best years we'd ever see for deer hunting.
Yeah.
We're getting all these things like quality deer management, where people were managing the properties to grow these big bucks and limiting their, which bucks they shot and when, and shooting more antlerless deer. And it was really a nice time. But now I don't know if we're always going to have those options, going forward. But the thing is, though, not to be a downer about it, because I think hunting, I still think is a strong part of the human condition, and that if it's not whitetails, we'll find something else to hunt, and maybe we'll swing back to where more of us take up duck hunting again, more of us become pheasant hunters again, or grouse hunters, whatever it might be, because I think the hunting instinct will always be there in a lot of us.
Yeah.
And the thing about, I think it was a fun issue too that we talked about in MeatEater, but not as much as some other issues. But the whole idea of why if the hunting population is dwindling the way it is in the eastern half of this country, why do we still see such even more hunting pressure out west? Well, because the hunters out west have never gone away. That hunting population has always stayed right about where it is now. But the guys going west to hunt are guys like you and me who are really serious hunters, and there's more of us now taking that hunt out there, and because maybe we are seeing some of this impact where we're thinking, well, I can't, I'm not seeing deer like I used to see down in southwestern Wisconsin, so maybe now I'll put more effort out west. But there's all these little dynamics that are always going on in the hunting world that I enjoy covering. I think that's why I've always enjoyed my job. The way I look at the outdoors, the way I report on the outdoors is it's my beat.
Yeah.
Just like I used to have a sports beat when I was first in sports writing back, 40 years ago.
Mhm.
I had my area of responsibility, and I still look at the outdoors as that kind of thing where I like to look at it, see what's going on. When you talk to me about something, I start perking up because I think I never heard about that before,
Yeah.
and I think if I were working in this area, I'd be writing about that
Yeah.
because it's just I think it's what I do. That's why I do the career. Why I've had the career I've had is I've always had that curiosity.
Like the DNR not putting caliber restrictions in the regulations this year or last year.
I didn't know
It's
that.
not in there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because some of that stuff, some of the stuff Wisconsin hunters and anglers, we really are good about making issues out of something that really don't need all that attention. Most hunters, left to their own devices, don't need to be told what caliber to shoot.
Correct.
You know,
Yes, that is true. But some people make a big stink out of it.
you probably don't remember it, but for all I know, it's still in the regulation books. We had laws when I was growing up that you couldn't shoot a bull. That's just like I think a 35-pound draw or
I
30
think
pound.
30.
Yeah, those kind of rules. I think. Do you really need that kind of regulation? I really, most guys coming into your store, I don't need to be told, well, that's too weak a bull for hunting.
Right.
We kind of figure these things out for ourselves, but we always like slapping laws down and making everybody live by these laws. And anyway,
I, I'm all for laws as long as they have a just tangible impact
Right.
on our resources, and that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Wrapping up that CWD thing. Where do you think is the best source of information for people that want to get more information? And I think that there's probably a feeling of hopelessness. Like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
What can I do? What can I do
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah.
There might be the viewpoint of like, well, what are we going to funnel a bunch of money in there? There's nothing that we can do about.
Yeah.
I think there's almost a level of hopelessness, or maybe with that, like the percentage that you said, maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 2% of the population. May it stabilize over time?
Correct.
We don't know if it goes up.
Yeah.
Does the population come down? Does the
Yeah.
CWD numbers come down? Then does it? Is it
Yeah.
is it an ebb and flow where it comes up and
Well,
goes down? Numbers get strong.
We have seen
again,
enough
and-
now where there's areas in Iowa County where the buck ages in the 3.5-year-old bucks, 2.5-year-old bucks and older.
Mhm.
That there's some areas down there now. If a buck runs by, if you're hunting that area, you can basically flip a coin on whether or not it has CWD or not. It's that high.
That high.
Basically, 50% chance that buck has that disease. The last 3 bucks I've shot in Richland County, one was 1.5 years old, and one was 3.5, one was 2.5. All 3 of them had the disease, and I couldn't tell it when I shot them. They were all even when I cleaned them, they looked perfectly normal. But within a year and a half, they would have been dead.
Yeah.
And now, though, we're seeing now on the farm I hunt where I found dead bucks down in the creek, up in the hill. And we saw one time just sitting there on this hillside, open day of gun season. When's the last time you saw a buck laying out in a little field like that, where you can see him from the road? That's not normal. Chances are that was a sick buck. When he moved up on him, he ran off. But that's not normal behavior for a whitetail. And so, I think we will see the population come down. But unfortunately, the disease will probably stay in that 50 to 60 higher percentage rates. But we really don't know because there's still, in the big picture, we're still a long ways away from knowing this disease as well as we want to. And you mentioned Wyoming. I've heard that a lot. People say, well, they've had it out in Wyoming and Colorado for years, but I think there are parts of Wyoming now where they have definitely documented a decline in the numbers.
Right.
The herd's just not there anymore. And the big bucks they used to be famous for are definitely not there anymore.
Right.
And so that happens. But a lot of these things and how that disease operates on the landscape, it's going to vary by region and vary by habitat. It's not going to be all the same. And so some areas will be lucky and they might not ever get, it might be a low density herd you're dealing with, like northern Wisconsin, but chances are that it won't hit that herd with quite that impact as it has down in the southern part of the state. But then again, you never had the numbers, so you might not see a big difference in how. But I can't predict that.
Not in the last 20, 30 years, anyway.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, though, I'm old enough too to remember when I used to hunt Langley County when I was 17, which was 50 years ago. I can tell you, it sucked. It was really not good deer hunting. And this is before wolves. This is before lots of things. And so it's not always been all rosy up north in the past either.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was up there as a teenager, we really thought the glory days were behind us.
Yep.
We thought it was never going to come back. Well, then years went by and we had warmer winters. We didn't have these killer winters that we had all through the 60s, and things bounced up. Like this one biologist used to say, it's like now even the bucks are having fawns. All of a sudden everything's just going crazy. But then that changes too. We might not like the way nature works, but sometimes too that we can try as humans to manipulate things, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Nobody likes feeling hopeless.
Oh, exactly. That's the thing I'd say is I am now living in an area, and I really want to make this point to folks, is that I'm now hunting an area that is really getting hit hard with CWD. When you think you can shoot three straight bucks, all have the disease, but yet I still keep hunting that spot because I still connect with it emotionally.
Yeah.
It's for I didn't grow up hunting there, but it's my cousin's farm.
Yeah.
I enjoy getting together with those folks and hunting with them. I enjoy the late season hunts when there's nobody out there, and I can shoot an antlerless deer. And it just to show that how fast things can change.
Yeah.
In one little farm. In 2021, I killed 5 deer there, 1 buck and 4 antlerless deer. I went there last year and I hunted just as hard. I never pulled the trigger once.
Yeah.
Just the way things work out. Sometimes the deer gets by you, then he gets by you again, and you think, how can this happen? And then the other thing is
snacks and naps for me.
Oh, it's just all it takes is one of the things I love about deer hunting is I think with one turn of the head, you can go from this really sucks to oh my god, and the same thing the other way. You can go from 1 year, oh my god, look at this. Next year, where are they? And I can't. A lot depends on what day you happen to be able to get out there and hunt.
Yeah.
All these things we can't control, and I love that part of hunting too, the unpredictability of it.
Yeah.
And hunting, it really has changed, but in some ways it hasn't changed at all. I can still hunt with the same 308 deer rifle I got when I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
The technology hasn't really changed in over 100 years for that rifle.
Yeah.
And it'll still probably be functioning, I hope, with my grandkids someday and my great-grandkids. I hope they hang on to that rifle. Because some of those things just don't change. That's the cool thing about it. And other things do, though. I look at your sporting goods shop here. I think, we never dreamed of half the stuff that's out there. And it's just it's fun to see, and that's where this never bores me.
Yeah, it baffles me what we carry sometimes. I see this stuff and I love the ingenuity and I get excited about the technology and these ideas like the saddle hunting thing is
Yeah,
something I'm,
yeah,
like just when you think that there's nothing left, they put a diaper on and climb up a tree and hang from it, like
yeah,
it constantly baffles me.
yeah,
But there's always that you commented on the nostalgia items I've got in my shop.
yeah.
And for me, so often, like you don't want to lose touch with the way it was.
Hmm.
There's so
Yeah.
much pureness yet to hopping in a canoe, dragging it down to a swamp lake and fishing without electronics
Hmm.
and no cars and no motors and completely, full blown silent sport
Hmm.
mode. There is something to be said about, sitting in a tree stand and not caring if you see a deer.
Hmm.
That was this year. You mentioned you can't do anything wrong. That was my season last year.
Yeah.
It was a big elk and big mule deer and big whitetails. I mean, it's just everything. It fell in my lap. But the greatest deer that we had last year was my grandpa's yearling doe.
Yeah.
It was his
Yeah.
70th deer season. We
Oh, cool.
sat in a box blind together all day, drank coffee, and told stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's this huge part where that didn't require technology.
Hmm.
It didn't require you know, new equipment. All it required was time,
Yeah.
which is probably one of the hardest things to buy nowadays.
You mentioned earlier, I really think this is one of the secrets to Meat Eater's success is they don't underestimate their listeners, their viewers, their readers. You can tell there's a real inherent respect.
Yes.
One of the things I've often talked about, and I see it, they're proof of it, is that if you go hunting with people, especially if they're people you don't know,
Hmm.
if the only thing you have in common with them is hunting or fishing, whatever it might be, you'll probably be bored with each other within a couple days. Because when the day's over and you're sitting around the camp at night, or you're sitting around in a tent, whatever it might be, and the only thing you have to talk about is hunting, the only thing you have to talk about is fishing, you're probably getting very bored with each other. And I think Meat Eater, I think it's one of the fun things about their podcast and their TV shows. They always do the cooking big segment
Yeah.
in the TV show. But you look at what those conversations bounce around that room in the podcast,
Yeah.
the things that pop into Steve's head, what Brody says, or what Giannis says, there's all these different ideas coming back and forth. I think that's the way good friends are, good hunters are. They're learning from each other. They're hearing a different perspective on something they didn't expect. The conversation. That's one article I saw written about Meat Eater by the New York Times. They said something about how the conversation ricocheted back and forth across the room,
Yeah.
and I think that's really a good description of it. And I think that's where part of the secret to that success of theirs is that they really do have these intelligent conversations that hunters, their listeners love it.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're learning something while they're listening to that. They're getting something out of it. They never, because you never know. One of the great little taglines they have on that introduction they do for the Meat Eater podcast is, "You can't predict anything." That little breathy voice of, I think the guy's name is Dan. I forget he was with Meat Eater early on, but he's no longer there.
Yeah.
But he had this great little line in there: "You can't predict anything," and I think that's the secret to Meat Eater, that
Yeah.
you can't predict what the hell's going to pop up next in that podcast.
It's one of those things too. Like, at the end of the day, when we're talking about, whether it's an approach to Western hunting through health and
Hmm.
fitness, yet there's a certain sector of hunter that could care less about
Oh,
walking
right,
to
right,
anything but the back of the 40.
right,
So hunting's not the same for you as it is that guy. And when
right.
we talk about, CWD, and you're talking about you're hunting in a place that has a declining deer population, which is true for so many places right now, for various different reasons, you're struggling. But I don't care, because it's not that I don't care, but my focus is the connection to the land.
Hmm.
And you've got some people that the only thing that they care about is the score of the deer. They might be
Yeah,
a game
yeah,
farm
right,
game farm hunter, paid on, and I've been on ranches in Texas and stuff like that. And
yeah,
I've experienced the
yeah,
joy of of the camaraderie in the big life of Texas, and how that can be fun too in the right setting,
Oh
in a
yeah,
fair
yeah.
game chase or a fair chase situation, if you would. But like, I feel like we're trying to stick a triangle, a rectangle, an octagon, and a pentagon into a square hole
Mhm.
all the time
Yeah.
with hunting. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from our conversation is that I think at times as we kick off this new season of the podcast that rather than going to that default position of this is who I am and this is the way that it's supposed to be done, understanding that hunting is so much more than just the way that we do it. And it's so much more than just the hunt itself or the fishing, no different. That this is a really diverse industry, a very diverse hobby, activity, lifestyle, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
that has a bunch of different people doing it a bunch of different ways, and it's all okay
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
long as it's done in an ethical, you know, position with high virtues and morals and characters, and done with moving our passion and our rights and our history and our heritage forward collectively, that it's probably beneficial for us to deep dive into the way that other people do it
Hmm.
and see what makes them tick and see why they're
Yeah.
passionate about it.
Yeah.
I think there's so much value to that, and that's one of the greatest blessings that I've had from this store is to get to live vicariously through the people that have done
Oh, I
great
bet.
things from coming and shopping here.
Yeah.
World record inland grizzly and number 12 moose and won this major tournament and Hall of Fame induction and in first time with kid last year.
Hmm.
There's so much to pull out of people that's amazing and makes you love it even
Hmm.
more. But I think that I've gotten, as always, about halfway through my notes, and I've got to be respectful of your time and our listeners that are going to hang on with us for an hour. So
Okay.
I think the only answer is to have you back again. I
Okay.
really
Well, I'd
enjoyed
love to do it.
I've loved my conversation
Yeah.
with you. For those people who want more information on Patrick Durkin, you can check out his website. It's patrickdurkinoutdoors.com. Fantastic follow on Instagram, really diverse, a lot of really thought provoking things. That's at Patrick Durkin Outdoors. As always, Chase Outdoors, the podcast, is going to be on all the most popular podcast platforms. We're going to be on YouTube. We are going to be airing monthly. Check our Facebook page, Chase Outdoors LLC. Check out our new e-commerce website, chase-outdoors.com, which is going to not only have our most recent podcast and our previous, but the updated schedule. Guys, I hope you appreciated this as much as I did. As always, get out, hunt, and fish because it's fantastic. So, thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to doing this again. We're going to have to do it. All right.
Thanks.
Hey, you guys have a great night.
That went by fast.
It went by so fast.
I was
That
I was
was
shocked.